We are joined on the phone by our senior counsel for global affairs and former Secretary of State and the former director of the CIA, Mike Pompeo. Mr. Secretary, always great to have you. I know you're traveling today, but we're glad you're able to talk with us. I have a question for you early up here, and that actually relates to China. And it's because this is the 4-year anniversary of Pastor John Saw, who is he was green card status in the United States. He wasn't a citizen, but he was allowed to be here. He was here for a number of years, but did a ministry work in China and has still been held by the Chinese. Your office worked diligently. We did get him moved eventually to a better facility, but the Chinese government on these persecution cases, and that's what these are with these Christian pastors, they're pretty unrelenting. I mean, we did good in getting a lot of these out with your help, of course. What's your feeling on what the Chinese government's doing here?
Well, Jay, it's great to be with you again. That particular case is particularly heartrending, but every time a Christian pastor is detained or harassed or held inappropriately, the faith is diminished. And the Chinese Communist Party is hard at this. They don't want people to be able to practice their faith when Christian leaders simply express their love of Jesus and want to preach to their flocks inside of China. You see the kind of thing they have done. We worked hard on this for 4 years. We made some real progress, Jay. The ACLJ was enormously helpful in that progress. But as you can see from the ongoing situation, there's still an awful lot more work to do in the United States. I hope under this administration must continue to be a force for good in trying to make sure that religious freedom can be expressed. When people go to China simply for that purpose, they cannot be detained.
Let me turn our attention to Israel. I am convinced that because of your efforts in the Middle East and the administration's efforts that you were leading in the State Department, that what we've seen is having a really positive lingering effect even on this administration. Yesterday, when the ICC prosecutor announced that, in fact, not only did she have the jurisdiction when the court issued that ridiculous ruling a couple of weeks back, but she said she was actually opening the investigation of Israel. The current State Department, the current Secretary of State came out and condemned the ICC, said they're standing with Israel on this, and that Palestine is not a state, the Palestinian territories are not a state, and that the ICC has no jurisdiction here, and that they will continue to support Israel. Now, I say that it's surprising because most of us did not expect that. My thought is, Mr. Secretary, is that they've seen, it's hard to ignore, even if you're a different political party, the success you all have had, we all had working together in the Middle East, even with the Golan Heights recognition, with the capital Jerusalem, but then the Abraham Accords. What do you think motivated the actually positive statement on the situation with the ICC here?
Jay, I was really heartened to see that. I personally took this mission on. You know The Hague, you know the International Criminal Court. You've been there yourself. This is an enormous challenge to the world where they attempt to assert jurisdiction over Americans, in this case, trying to come after Israel for actions that they have taken. I was heartened to see this administration take a stance that was pretty close to the work that we had done. And this woman, Fatou Bensouda, the chief prosecutor who made this announcement yesterday, is corrupt. She wants to use her role to line her own pockets. We sanctioned her in our administration. I hope this administration won't relieve those sanctions on her personally, and will continue to make sure that the ICC doesn't assert jurisdiction in places it ought not, certainly with respect to Israel, and of course with respect to the young men and women who are serving in the United States military that they continue to threaten to go after for the lawful actions they took in Afghanistan.
You know, it's which is another case we talked about at length yesterday. That's when I appeared at the hearing. I participated in the trial on the one involving the U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan. It's interesting. Progressives, Mike, are already saying that how outraged they are on Secretary Blinken's statements. Rashida Tlaib said, "No one is above the law. The International Criminal Court has the authority and duty to independently and impartially investigate, and the U.S. should not interfere with its ability to do so." And, of course, she focused on alleged human rights and war crimes that were conducted by, allegedly, Israel. But the point is, and the point of the Secretary of State and the point that you've made is that there was no jurisdiction for this court in the first place because Israel's not subject to the Rome Statute, which is what creates the ICC.
It's a crazy notion that an elected official in the United States of America would want to cede American sovereignty in this way, to hand over to a renegade court that has no capacity to be controlled by the United States, and which we have not consented to have our people held accountable to, that any elected official would say, no, that's okay. They can come after Americans, and we think that would be all right, or they can come after our friends and allies in Israel, and that would be all right. It is a crazy notion. It's one that, frankly, I'm glad there is a broad bipartisan consensus in most quarters. I just regret that the progressive end of the Democrat Party wants to hand over American sovereignty in this way.
So I want to now turn it quickly to Iran, because since you were on the air earlier this week with us, there's been another move. The Iranians are issuing very strong statements saying that the United States will be brought to its knees. They're praising, of course, the change of administrations. And we've now had these, additional proxy attacks, and that whatever that attack that President Biden launched in the middle of the desert somewhere. What do we do to contain the Iranians here?
So we had the right end of the stick on this. Our policy was right. Your point about the statements this week, those were from President Hassan Rouhani, right, who said that we will kneel before the great nation of Iran. This is the man who Secretary Kerry, when he was in office, said was the moderate, was the reasonable person inside of Iran. This is a murderous regime. This is a regime that's intent on the destruction of Israel. I saw Prime Minister Netanyahu's comments yesterday. He was exactly right. The United States has a responsibility to continue to put pressure on the Iranian regime. And if we head down this path, Jay, that it looks like we're headed down towards appeasing Iran, this will decrease security for the United States of America. It will decrease security for our friends in Israel and the entire Middle East. All the work that we did to build out a stable coalition to push back against Iran is likely to be undermined.
Let me do this really quickly. We've got about a minute and 15 seconds here. You tweeted about borders. You said stronger borders and preserving the 2A buildings, strong families in every community. Liberals pretend to care about children while kids in the Democrat-led inner city struggle. What's your view on this new immigration battle that's going to come right to the border again?
It is indecent to think that having an open borders policy is good for kids anywhere in the world. It's certainly not good for the United States. But I saw some of these cases firsthand, Jay, where these young people are trafficked across our border, trafficked through Guatemala and El Salvador and through Mexico. It upends their lives. Many of them are treated as slaves, and our human traffickers prey on them. We ought not be encouraging this. Our policy has to be that we're going to secure our borders, and we're going to have a lawful, reasonable immigration policy that we're going to enforce with enormous vigor.
Secretary Mike Pompeo, Senior Counsel, ACLJ for Global Affairs. Thanks for being with us. Safe travels, and appreciate your insights as always. Thanks for being part of the team.
So long. Have a good day.
Very good.